Commander Yuki stood at the observation deck of the massive alien ship, watching Earth grow smaller in the distance. The blue planet looked peaceful from here, but she knew better. Down there, humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years, and now the galaxy wanted their help. The alien, who called himself High Marshal Vorthak, walked beside her. His skin was gray and smooth like polished stone, and his forearms moved in careful patterns when he spoke. Behind them followed three other aliens from different species. One looked like a crystal formation that somehow walked and talked. Another had fur covering its entire body and yellow eyes that never blinked. The third was tall and thin with skin that changed colors. "Your species is young," Vorthak said in the strange way aliens spoke. Their words came through a device that turned alien sounds into human language. Most civilizations need many centuries before they develop space travel. You achieved it in less than 100 years. Yuki nodded but said nothing. She had read the files about the Galactic Defense Coalition. 27 different alien species working together to fight something called the Devourers. The files described creatures that ate entire planets and turned star systems into empty space. The Coalition had been losing this war for 50 years. "We need soldiers," the crystal alien said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes. "The Devourers grow stronger while we grow weaker. Every species must contribute to the war effort." Captain Do-hyun stepped forward from where he had been studying the alien weapons displays. He was younger than Yuki, but had spent 10 years in special operations before joining the space program. "What kind of soldiers do you need exactly?" The question seemed to confuse the aliens. They looked at each other in that way people do when they do not understand something obvious. "Brave soldiers," the furry alien said finally. "Honorable warriors who will defend Coalition worlds from the Devourer threat." Lieutenant Sora laughed softly. She had been quiet during most of the tour, but now she looked interested. "That is not what Captain Do-hyun meant. He wants to know about your military doctrine. What are your rules of engagement? How do you organize your forces? What are your objectives?" "Our objective is to protect innocent life," Vorthak said. "We fight defensively. We build strong barriers around our worlds and try to stop the Devourers before they can attack civilian populations." Yuki felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had commanded troops in 3 different wars before joining the space program. She knew what defensive fighting meant. It meant waiting for the enemy to choose when and where to attack. It meant giving up initiative. It meant losing slowly instead of winning quickly. "How many worlds have you lost in the last 10 years?" she asked. 47, the tall, thin alien said sadly. Its skin had turned dark blue, which seemed to mean sadness. "Each time we build stronger defenses, but the Devourers adapt. They grow more clever with each attack." Do-hyun and Sora exchanged looks. Yuki could see them thinking the same thing she was thinking. 47 worlds lost while fighting. Defensively. The Coalition was not losing slowly. They were losing fast. "Show us your casualty reports," Do-hyun said. The aliens looked confused again. "Casualty reports. Your killed and wounded statistics, broken down by unit and engagement type. We need to see your loss ratios compared to enemy losses." Vorthak made a sound that the translator could not handle. "We do not think about war in terms of numbers. Each life is precious. Each death is a tragedy that we mourn." Sora stepped closer to the weapons display. Her hands moved over the controls like she was born to use alien technology. Numbers and diagrams appeared in the air showing energy output and range calculations. "These plasma rifles have good stopping power but terrible rate of fire. You could increase combat effectiveness by 40% with simple modifications to the charging system." "We do not modify weapons to kill more efficiently," the crystal alien said. Its voice sounded shocked. We use only the force necessary to defend ourselves. That is why you are losing, Yuki said quietly. The observation deck went silent. Outside, the ship stars moved past in strange patterns as they traveled faster than light toward Coalition space. Inside the deck, 5 humans faced 6 aliens, and suddenly everyone understood that they were very different kinds of creatures. Explain, Vorthak said. Yuki walked to the central display and called up a map of Coalition space. Red areas showed worlds lost to the Devourers. Yellow areas showed worlds under attack. Green areas showed worlds still safe. There was much more red and yellow than green. You are fighting a defensive war against an expanding enemy, she said. Basic military. Science says this strategy will always fail. The enemy chooses when and where to attack. They can concentrate forces while you must spread yours thin to protect everything. Every time you stop one attack, they learn from it and plan better attacks. What would you do differently? The furry alien asked. Doyen moved to stand beside Yuki. Take the initiative. Find their supply lines and cut them. Identify their command structure and eliminate it. Force them to defend their own territory instead of always attacking yours. Attack their breeding worlds, Sora added. Destroy their ability to replace losses. Make the cost of this war too high for them to continue. The aliens stared at the humans like they had just suggested something horrible. The tall, thin alien's skin turned bright red. The crystal alien made sounds like breaking glass. Even Vorthak seemed to shrink away from them. You speak of genocide, he said. We speak of victory, Yuki replied. You want to save lives. The fastest way to save lives is to end the war. The fastest way to end the war is to make it impossible for your enemy to continue fighting. But the cost, the furry alien whispered. The cost of what? Doyen asked. The cost of winning. Calculate the numbers. How many coalition citizens die every year this war continues? How many more will die if it goes on for another 50 years? Compare that to the cost of one major offensive operation that ends the threat permanently. Lieutenant Sora brought up new displays showing population statistics and resource allocation. Her fingers moved quickly over alien controls as she pulled data from coalition databases. You have lost over 2 billion citizens in this war. Current casualty rates suggest you will lose 5 billion more in the next 20 years if nothing changes. A coordinated offensive against devourer breeding worlds would cost maybe 50 million military casualties but save billions of civilian lives. You think like machines, the crystal alien said, calculating death as if lives were numbers in an equation. We think like soldiers, Yuki said. Our job is to win wars with minimum total casualties. Sometimes that means accepting higher military casualties to reduce civilian casualties. Sometimes it means making hard choices that feel wrong, but save more lives in the end. The aliens huddled together, speaking in their own languages. The translation devices could not handle multiple conversations at once, so the humans could only hear fragments. Words like barbaric and unthinkable and necessary floated through the electronic noise. Finally, Vorthak turned back to them. The Coalition Council must vote on this. We cannot make such decisions alone. Of course, Yuki said. But while you are voting, people are dying. Every day you delay costs lives. We understand, Vorthak said. But we must do this properly. We must follow our laws and traditions. Do-Yun smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Your laws and traditions are why you are losing this war. The rest of the journey to Coalition headquarters passed in uncomfortable silence. The aliens avoided the humans except when necessary for ship operations. The humans spent their time studying Coalition military records and finding patterns that disturbed them more with each report they read. When they finally arrived at the massive space station that served as Coalition headquarters, Yuki knew that Everything was about to change. The galaxy was about to learn what humans meant when they talked about winning wars. She was not sure the aliens would like what they learned. Captain Do-hyun watched the alien recruits stumble through basic combat formations and wondered how these creatures had survived long enough to build spaceships. 6 months had passed since the Coalition Council voted to accept human military. Advisors and every day brought new evidence that the galaxy did not understand warfare at all. "Stop!" he called out as the mixed unit of aliens tried to advance across the training field. "Everyone stop moving right now!" The recruits froze in place. There were 12 of them from 6 different species. 2 Kelrani, like High Marshal Vorthak, with their gray skin and 4 arms. 3 crystal beings whose names were impossible for humans to pronounce. 4 furry creatures called Vixani, who communicated partially through scent. 2 tall, thin Zephyrins whose skin showed their emotions. 1 massive creature that looked like a walking boulder and spoke in subsonic rumbles. "Cadet Zephlon, Do-hyun," said to one of the Zephyrins. "What is your unit doing wrong?" The young alien's skin shifted to orange, which meant confusion. "We are advancing toward the objective, sir." "You are walking toward the objective," Do-hyun corrected. "Walking in a straight line across open ground with no cover and no coordination. In a real battle, you would all be dead in 30 seconds. He gestured to Sergeant Minho, who activated the training field's holographic enemy positions. Suddenly, the field filled with simulated devourer positions, showing overlapping fields of fire that covered every meter of ground the recruits had just crossed. "Look at the display," Do-hyun said. "Count the number of weapons that can hit your current positions." The aliens studied the display with growing horror. Each of their positions was targeted by at least 4 different enemy weapons. Some positions were targeted by 8 or 9. "But we were moving toward the objective," one of the Kelrani said. "Is that not correct?" "Moving toward the objective is not the same as completing the objective," Sergeant Minho explained. "Dead soldiers cannot complete objectives." Corporal Gina stepped forward carrying a demonstration charge. She was small even by human standards, but the aliens had learned to fear her more than any of the other instructors. "Watch and learn," she said. She activated the training field's full combat simulation. Holographic devourers appeared at their positions and began firing simulated weapons. The display showed exactly what would happen to any force that advanced, the way the alien recruits had been advancing. "Suppressing fire," Gina called out as she triggered the demonstration weapons. "Keep the enemy busy while movement elements advance under cover." Holographic human soldiers appeared on the flanks of the enemy position. They moved in short rushes from cover to cover while other humans fired continuously at the enemy positions. The enemy weapons could not track targets that moved unpredictably and used terrain for protection. "Coordinated assault," Minho added as the simulation continued. "Multiple elements attacking from different directions at the same time. The enemy cannot defend everywhere at once." The holographic humans reached the enemy flanks and attacked from 3 directions simultaneously. The enemy position collapsed in less than 2 minutes with minimal human casualties. "Time for questions," Do-hyun said as the simulation ended. "Cadet." Zephlon raised one of his 4 hands. The human soldiers fired continuously even when they could not see targets. "Is this not wasteful?" "Suppressing fire forces the enemy to keep their heads down," Gina explained. "They cannot aim accurately if they are hiding from your bullets. The cost of extra ammunition is much less than the cost of losing soldiers." A Kelrani cadet asked, "Why did the humans attack from multiple directions? Would it not be more honorable to face the enemy directly?" The human instructors exchanged looks. This was the same question they heard every day from every alien species. Honor and warfare did not mix well together. "Honor does not stop bullets," Minho said patiently. "Dead heroes cannot protect the people they left behind. Live soldiers can fight another day." Dr. Yunbi entered the training area, carrying her data pad and observation equipment. She was the only non-military human at the facility, but somehow, the aliens feared her most of all. Her job was to study how the training affected alien psychology, and her reports made disturbing reading. "How are our students progressing?" she asked Do-hyun. "They learn the techniques quickly enough," he replied. "But they struggle with the concepts behind the techniques." "Show me." Do-hyun called the alien recruits into formation. "Today we will discuss acceptable losses. Lieutenant Sora will explain the basic principles." Lieutenant Sora activated a tactical display showing a hypothetical battle scenario. Coalition intelligence reports that the Devourers plan to attack the civilian colony on Kepler-7. Population 2 million. Estimated time before Devourer arrival is 72 hours. The display showed the colony world with its cities and defense installations. Red markers indicated likely Devourer approach routes and landing zones. Coalition fleet assets in the area include 1 heavy cruiser, 3 destroyers, and 12 fighter squadrons, Sora continued. Estimated probability of successful defense using current coalition tactics is 15%. The alien recruits looked uncomfortable as they always did when humans discussed probability and statistics related to warfare. "Alternative approach," Sora said as the display changed. "Sacrifice the heavy cruiser as a decoy to draw Devourer forces away from the colony. While the enemy destroys the cruiser, the destroyers and fighters attack their troop transports. Probability of successful colony defense increases to 75%. One of the crystal beings made sounds like breaking glass, which meant distress. "You speak of deliberately sacrificing a ship and its crew. I speak of saving 2 million civilians." Sora replied. "The heavy cruiser carries 800 crew members. Do the mathematics. 800 military casualties versus 2 million civilian casualties." "But those 800 soldiers would die on purpose," Cadet Zeflon said. His skin had turned deep purple, which meant moral conflict. "We would be sending them to die." "They are soldiers," Do-hyun said. "Soldiers accept risk to protect civilians. That is what being a soldier means." Dr. Yunbi made notes on her datapad while watching the aliens process this concept. Most species in the coalition had never developed the idea that military personnel might deliberately sacrifice themselves for strategic advantage. Their warfare was ritualized and limited with complex rules about when fighting could begin and end. "What if the crew of the heavy cruiser refuses to participate in this sacrifice?" asked one of the Vixani. "Then you explain the situation clearly," Minyo said. "You tell them exactly what will happen if they refuse. 2 million civilians will die. You ask for volunteers. In human military history, there have always been volunteers for necessary sacrifices." "And if there are no volunteers?" the Vixani pressed. The training area went very quiet. This was the question that made alien cadets most uncomfortable. It forced them to confront the difference between human military thinking and their own cultural values. "Then you give orders," Gina said simply. "Command decisions are not democratic. Someone must have the authority to make hard choices when lives are at stake. Even if those choices mean certain death for your own soldiers," Cadet Zeflon asked. "Especially then," Do-hyun replied. "Anyone can make easy choices. Leaders make the choices that others cannot make." Dr. Yunbi stepped forward. "Let me ask you all a question. In your home cultures, how do you choose military leaders?" The aliens looked at each other uncertainly. "We choose the bravest," said one of the Kelrani. "The most honorable fighters. We select those who show the greatest wisdom," added a crystal being. "Humans choose leaders who can make decisions that save the most lives," Dr. Unbi said. Even when those decisions feel wrong. Even when those decisions require sacrificing some lives to save many lives." She activated her own display showing psychological profiles of successful human military commanders throughout history. "Every great human general has ordered soldiers to their deaths. They carry that burden so that civilian populations do not have to carry a larger burden." The alien recruits studied the profiles with growing unease. Human military leaders were described in terms that made them sound like calculating machines rather than heroes. This is why your species is so effective at warfare, Dr. Yunbi continued. You have cultural mechanisms that allow individuals to make decisions that most species cannot make. You separate the emotional cost of command decisions from the strategic necessity of those decisions. Is that healthy? Asked Cadet Zeflon. Dr. Yunbi smiled, but it was not a happy expression. Probably not. Human commanders suffer from depression, guilt, and psychological trauma at much higher rates than normal humans. But they function well enough to win wars. The training session ended with the alien recruits looking more disturbed than usual. As they filed out of the training area, Dr. Yunbi approached the human instructors. The psychological evaluations are showing concerning trends, she said quietly. The alien recruits are learning your methods, but the knowledge is causing cultural shock. Some species are questioning their fundamental values about the nature of warfare and sacrifice. Is that necessarily bad? Do-hyun asked. Maybe they need to question those values if they want to survive this war. Maybe, Dr. Yunbi agreed. But we are changing these species in ways they do not fully understand. Commander Yuki stood before the Coalition War Council reviewing casualty statistics that would have been impossible 2 years ago. The numbers told a story that made her both proud and deeply uncomfortable. Human training methods had transformed. Coalition military effectiveness, but the cost was measured in more than just enemy dead. Casualty rates have decreased by 78% across all coalition forces, she reported to the assembled alien leaders. Mission success rates have increased by 340%. Devourer territorial expansion has stopped for the first time in 50 years. High Marshal Vorthak studied the holographic displays with an expression that was difficult to read on his alien features. These results exceed our most optimistic projections. Your training methods are remarkably effective. However, added Ambassador Quithen, representing the pacifist Crystalline Collective, we have received disturbing reports about the psychological impact of these methods on our military personnel. Colonel Hyunwoo stepped forward from where he had been observing the briefing. His advanced tactics course had become the most requested and most feared program in the Coalition Military Academy. Psychological adaptation is normal when adopting new strategic doctrines. Personnel require time to adjust to more effective methodologies. You call it adaptation, Quithen replied. Our medical personnel call it moral injury. Soldiers from species that have never deliberately killed non-combatants are now planning strikes against civilian infrastructure. Warriors who once fought, only to defend their homes, now speak casually about acceptable loss ratios. Major Soyeon entered the briefing room carrying classified reports from her Psychological Operations Division. Her work had been so successful at breaking Devourer morale that entire enemy fleets had surrendered without firing a shot. But her methods involved exploiting psychological vulnerabilities in ways that horrified most coalition species. The Devourer. Command structure is showing signs of systematic breakdown, she announced. Intelligence intercepts indicate widespread demoralization and unit cohesion failures. 3 separate Devourer fleets have requested negotiations for conditional surrender. How did you achieve these results? Asked a Vixani representative, Soyeon. Activated a display showing psychological warfare techniques that her division had developed. Targeted propaganda exploiting Devourer pack instincts. False intelligence suggesting betrayal by Devourer leadership. Simulated communications indicating that Devourer breeding worlds are under attack by coalition forces. The alien representatives looked at the display with growing horror. The Devourer species communicated through complex chemical signals that indicated social hierarchy and group loyalty. Soyeon's division had learned to fake these signals and use them to spread false information that turned Devourer units against each other. You are lying to them, Ambassador Quithen said. We are providing them with information designed to reduce their combat effectiveness, Soyeon corrected. This psychological pressure saves coalition lives by ending battles before they begin. But it is still deception, still manipulation. Yes, Soyon agreed. War is deception and manipulation. The enemy uses these same techniques against us. The difference is that humans understand how to use them more effectively. General Wu Jin entered the briefing room carrying the most classified documents in Coalition military files. His strategic planning division had been working on something called Operation Extinction for 6 months. The plan was so radical that only the highest levels of coalition leadership were permitted to know its details. The War Council requested feasibility analysis for a permanent solution to the Devourer threat, he announced. My staff has completed that analysis. He activated the central display, and every alien in the room fell silent. The holographic map showed the entire Devourer territory with key installations marked in different colors, breeding worlds in red, command centers in blue, resource extraction sites in yellow, supply routes in green, coordinated simultaneous strikes against all primary Devourer installations, Wu Jin explained. The operation would require the majority of coalition fleet assets and would eliminate the Devourer ability to wage war permanently. Casualties, asked High Marshal Vorthak. Devourer casualties would be approximately 800 million, including civilian populations on breeding worlds. Coalition casualties would be approximately 50,000 primarily from the diversionary fleet, required to draw Devourer forces away from their home systems. The briefing room was completely silent for 30 seconds. Ambassador Quithen was the first to speak. You are proposing genocide. We are proposing victory, General Wu Jin replied. Complete elimination of the Devourer threat with minimal coalition losses. Current casualty projections show that continuing the war at present intensity will cost 5 billion coalition lives over the next 20 years. Operation Extinction would end the war in 6 months with 50,000 military casualties. But 800 million Devourers would die, a Kelrani representative said. 800 million enemies who have already killed over 2 billion coalition citizens, Colonel Hyunwoo added. The mathematics are straightforward. Either they die or we continue dying. Dr. Yunbi had been taking notes throughout the briefing, but now she set down her datapad and looked directly at the assembled alien leaders. You asked humans to help you win this war. This is how humans win wars. We identify the enemy's critical vulnerabilities and exploit them completely. We calculate the minimum force required to achieve total victory and apply that force without hesitation. Even if that force includes deliberate attacks on civilian populations, Ambassador Quithen asked. Especially then, Commander Yuki said. The Devourers are not like coalition species. They do not have separate civilian and military populations. Every Devourer is a potential warrior. Every breeding world produces future enemies. Eliminating their reproductive capacity is strategically necessary. You speak of children? Quithen whispered. We speak of future soldiers, Major Soyon replied. Devourer young mature into combat-capable units within 2 years. Every breeding cycle that continues extends the war and costs more coalition lives. General Wu Jin expanded the display to show detailed timeline projections. Implementation of Operation Extinction requires approval within 30 days. Devourer intelligence gathering is improving. If we delay beyond that window, they will detect our preparations and relocate critical assets. High Marshal Vorthak studied the projections carefully. Success probability, 92% for primary objectives, 87% for complete elimination of Devourer war-making capacity. And if we refuse to authorize this operation, Colonel Hyunwoo brought up alternative projections showing continued conventional warfare. Coalition casualty rates return to pre-human training, levels within 18 months as Devourers adapt to our current tactics. Total coalition losses over the next decade exceed 10 billion. Probability of ultimate coalition victory drops to less than 30%. The alien representatives looked at each other with the kind of desperate expression that appeared on faces when people realized they had no good choices remaining. "We need time to consider this proposal," High Marshal Vorthak said finally. "Time is a luxury we do not have," General Wu Jin replied. "Every day we delay costs lives and reduces our probability of success." Ambassador Quithen stood slowly. "You have given us an impossible choice. Become monsters to defeat monsters, or maintain our principles and accept defeat." "You have given yourselves that choice," Commander Yuki said. "We simply showed you what the choice actually looks like when you remove comfortable illusions about the nature of warfare." Dr. Yunbi gathered her notes and prepared to leave. "I will need to expand psychological support services for coalition personnel, regardless of what decision you make. Learning to think like humans about warfare has traumatized soldiers from every species in the coalition. Some may never recover their pre-war psychological baselines." "Is that the price of survival?" asked a Vixani representative. "That is the price of victory," Dr. Yunbi replied. "Survival and victory are not the same thing. Survival means continuing, to exist while gradually losing. Victory means making choices that ensure your enemy cannot continue to threaten you." The briefing ended with no decisions made, but everyone understood that a decision would be made soon. The galaxy had learned to fight like humans, but now they had to decide if they could accept the ultimate implications of fighting like humans. Outside the briefing room, Commander Yuki found General Wu Jin reviewing casualty projections for Operation Extinction. "Do you think they will approve it?" she asked. "They will approve it," he said with certainty. "Because the alternative is unacceptable, and they are finally beginning to understand that unacceptable alternatives are not really alternatives at all. And after the operation succeeds, the galaxy will be safe from the Devourer threat. But they will never be safe from themselves. We have taught them that sometimes survival requires abandoning everything you thought you believed about right and wrong." Commander Yuki looked through the transparent walls of the space station at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, Devourer fleets were preparing for battles they did not know they had already lost. Admiral Sunwoo checked the chronometer on his command console and calculated that his fleet had exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes left to live. Around him, the bridge crew of the heavy cruiser Determination worked with calm efficiency, preparing for a battle they knew they could not win. Behind them followed 49 other ships carrying 50,000 coalition personnel who had volunteered for Operation Extinction's diversionary attack. "All ships report ready for final approach," Lieutenant Commander Jiwon announced from the tactical station. "Devourer sensor networks are tracking our advance but showing no signs of suspicion." The plan was brutally simple in the way that human military plans always were. Sunwoo's sacrificial fleet would attack the heavily defended Devourer command, world drawing maximum enemy attention, while the real assault force struck at undefended breeding worlds throughout Devourer space. By the time the enemy realized what was happening, it would be too late to save their species. "Signal from Coalition Command," reported Captain Keong from the communications station. "Main assault force has reached their jump points and is ready to begin the primary operation." Admiral Sunwoo studied the tactical display showing Devourer defensive positions, orbital platforms bristling with weapons, fighter squadrons patrolling in tight formations, capital ships positioned to cover all likely approach routes, everything exactly as human intelligence had predicted. "Begin final approach," he ordered. "All ships maintain formation and target the orbital defense grid as planned." On ships throughout the sacrificial fleet, Coalition personnel from dozens of different species prepared for humanity's ultimate lesson about the cost of victory. Kelrani gunners loaded weapons they had been taught to use with ruthless efficiency. Vixani engineers powered systems designed for maximum damage output rather than crew survival. Crystalline navigators plotted courses that would bring their ships deep into enemy defensive zones with no possibility of retreat. "Devourer fighters launching," Lieutenant Commander Jiwon reported. Initial count shows approximately 800 enemy craft approaching our position. Acknowledged, Admiral Sunwoo replied. Signal all ships to implement suppression protocols. The HFY coalition fleet opened fire while still at extreme range, flooding space with continuous weapon discharges designed to disrupt enemy formations rather than achieve immediate kills. Human tactical doctrine emphasized that destroying enemy morale was often more valuable than destroying enemy ships. Confused and demoralized enemies made mistakes that could be exploited. Enemy return fire incoming, Captain Kyung announced. Multiple missile launches detected from orbital platforms. Admiral Sunwoo watched the tactical display as hundreds of enemy weapons converged on his fleet. Point defense systems engaged automatically, but everyone knew the mathematics. The coalition ships could not stop every incoming missile, and the enemy had vastly superior numbers. First wave impact in 30 seconds, Ji-won called out. All ships brace for contact. The heavy cruiser, Determination, shuddered as enemy weapons found their target. Damage reports flowed in from throughout the ship, but Admiral Sunwoo ignored them. His job was not to preserve his ship or his crew. His job was to keep the enemy focused on this battle while the real operation proceeded elsewhere. Signal from Main Assault Force, Captain Kyung reported. Primary targets have been engaged. Devourer breeding worlds are under attack across 7-star systems. Excellent, Admiral Sunwoo replied as another wave of enemy fire slammed into his ship. Continue the diversionary attack. Draw as many enemy units as possible away from their home territories. Lieutenant Commander Ji-won brought up long-range sensor data showing the main operation's progress. Coalition strike forces had simultaneously attacked 17 different Devourer breeding worlds using tactics that would have been considered war crimes 6 months ago. Coordinated bombardment of civilian population centers, targeted destruction of reproductive facilities, systematic elimination of non-combatant populations to prevent future enemy recruitment. Devourer command frequencies show extreme agitation, reported the communications officer. They are attempting to recall defensive fleets from forward positions. 2. Late, Admiral Sunwoo said with satisfaction. Even at maximum speed, their reinforcements cannot reach the breeding worlds before our assault forces complete their missions. The bridge lights flickered as another enemy salvo penetrated the ship's defenses. Through the transparent hull, Admiral Sunwoo could see other coalition ships burning in space. The destroyer Courage had lost main power and was drifting helplessly while enemy fighters swarmed around it. The cruiser Dedication was venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches but continued firing at enemy positions. Admiral Lieutenant Commander Ji-won said quietly, "We have achieved our primary objective. The enemy is fully committed to this engagement. Should we begin withdrawal procedures?" Admiral Sunwoo smiled grimly. "There are no withdrawal procedures, Lieutenant Commander. Our orders are to maintain enemy attention until the main assault force completes all primary objectives. That means we fight until we can no longer fight." Medical Officer Hanuel moved through the bridge treating wounded personnel while monitoring casualty reports from throughout the fleet. Her job was not to save lives, but to keep people functional long enough to complete their mission. Human medical doctrine in military operations focused on maintaining combat effectiveness rather than preserving individual health. Casualty reports. "From all ships," she announced. "Total personnel losses at 37% and rising. Multiple ships reporting critical system failures." "Acknowledged," Admiral Sunwoo replied. "Signal all commanders to maintain attack intensity regardless of damage levels." The Determination's main weapons array scored a direct hit on a Devourer orbital platform, sending debris cascading through local space. Around them, Coalition ships continued their hopeless attack with determination that amazed even their human commanders. Alien crews that had never fought offensive operations 6 months ago now pressed forward into overwhelming enemy fire without hesitation. Signal from Coalition Command. Captain Kyung reported through the smoke filling the bridge. "Main assault. Force reports successful completion of primary objectives." Devourer breeding capacity has been reduced by estimated 94%. What about secondary objectives? Admiral Sunwoo asked as he watched the tactical display show more coalition ships disappearing under enemy fire. Secondary objectives proceeding on schedule. Devourer command and control networks are under attack. Resource extraction facilities are being systematically destroyed. Lieutenant Commander Jiwon looked up from her console with an expression of amazement. Admiral, we actually did it. The operation is succeeding beyond all projections. Of course, it is succeeding, Admiral Sunwoo replied. Human military planning accounts for all probable variables. The only question was whether coalition personnel could execute human tactical doctrine with sufficient precision. And the answer to that question, Medical Officer Hanel asked as she treated a Kelrani weapons officer whose 4 arms had been badly burned. The answer is that they learned well, Admiral Sunwoo said proudly. They learned to fight like humans when survival required it. The heavy cruiser Determination took another direct hit that knocked out artificial gravity and filled the bridge with floating debris. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows as alien and human crew members worked side by side to keep their ship functioning long enough to complete their mission. Final casualty assessment, Medical Officer Hanul reported. Fleet-wide personnel. Losses now exceed 70%. Ship losses at 43%. Remaining vessels showing critical damage across all systems. Time remaining until main assault force completes all objectives, Admiral Sunwoo asked. Captain Kyung consulted. Her tactical displays. Estimated completion time for all secondary objectives is 1 hour and 47 minutes. Then we hold this position for 1 hour and 47 minutes, Admiral Sunwoo decided. Signal all ships to maintain engagement regardless of cost. Around them space was filled with burning coalition vessels and floating debris from both sides. The Devourer defenders had taken terrible casualties, but they still vastly outnumbered the attacking force. What they did not understand was that numbers meant nothing when the enemy was willing to accept total losses to achieve strategic objectives. Admiral Lieutenant Commander Jiwon said, as she studied incoming intelligence reports, Devourer home. Fleet is attempting to break contact and return to defend their breeding worlds. Order all remaining ships to pursue, Admiral Sunwoo commanded. Do not allow any enemy vessels to escape this engagement. Sir, that will place our ships in extremely dangerous positions. Our ships are already in extremely dangerous positions. Lieutenant Commander, the difference is that now we can ensure maximum enemy casualties before our own inevitable losses. The sacrificial fleet's final hour unfolded exactly as human tactical doctrine predicted. Coalition ships pursued retreating Devourer forces deeper into the enemy defensive grid, accepting certain destruction to prevent any enemy units from reaching the breeding worlds under attack. One by one, coalition vessels disappeared from the tactical display until only a handful remained. Marshal Yuki stood in the Memorial Garden on Coalition Central, watching alien children learn lessons that their grandparents could never have imagined. 2 years had passed since Operation Extinction, and the galaxy was safe from the Devourer. Threat, but the cost of that safety was still being calculated in ways that went far beyond simple casualty statistics. Tactical formation exercise beginning, announced General Taemin as he supervised a group of young alien cadets through advanced combat maneuvers. These children had been born into a galaxy at war and raised with human military doctrine as part of their basic education. They moved with precision that would have amazed their elders and spoke casually about concepts like acceptable losses and strategic deception. The Memorial Garden commemorated the 50,000 coalition personnel who died in Operation Extinction, but it also served another purpose. It reminded visitors of the moment when the galaxy learned that survival sometimes required becoming something fundamentally different than what you had been before. Marshal Yuki called Commander Yeona as she approached through the carefully maintained paths between memorial stones. She was one of the few pre-war coalition officers still serving in active duty, and her presence always made conversations more complicated. The Security Council has requested your assessment of the new threat evaluation. Yuki activated her portable display, showing intelligence reports that had been classified until this morning. A species called the hegemony had been expanding aggressively through systems near coalition space. Their military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force and complete subjugation of conquered populations. 2 weeks ago, they had demanded that the coalition surrender 3 border systems or face immediate attack. Standard aggressive expansion pattern, Yuki observed as she studied the tactical data. They assume we will respond like traditional coalition forces used to respond. Defensive deployments and diplomatic negotiations. What do you recommend? Commander Yeona asked. Preemptive strike against their forward bases, Yuki replied without hesitation. Eliminate their ability to threaten coalition territory before they can organize a major offensive. Standard human doctrine for dealing with aggressive neighbors. Commander Yeona looked uncomfortable in the way that pre-war coalition officers always looked when humans discussed military options. They have not actually attacked us yet. A preemptive strike would be an act of aggression against a species that has only made threats. Threats backed by military preparation and troop movements toward our border, Yuki pointed out. Waiting for them to attack first gives them the advantage of choosing when and where to begin hostilities. General Taman approached with his group of alien cadets who had been listening to the conversation with interest. These young people had grown up with human military instructors, and their questions often revealed how much the galaxy had changed. Marshal Yuki said a young Kelrani cadet, would a preemptive strike against the hegemony be morally justified under human military ethics? The question would have been unthinkable from an alien 6 years ago. Coalition species had never developed the concept of preemptive warfare as a legitimate military option. Now their children discussed it as casually as humans discussed weather patterns. Morally justified is the wrong question, Yuki replied. The correct question is whether a preemptive strike serves coalition strategic interests better than alternative options. But surely moral considerations matter, Commander Yeona said. Moral considerations that get your people killed are luxury items for species that can afford them, Yuki said. The hegemony is building invasion fleets and positioning them near our territory. They have publicly announced their intention to conquer coalition worlds. Waiting for them to attack first means accepting higher coalition casualties when war becomes inevitable. Strategic analyst Jiho stepped forward from where he had been reviewing the intelligence data. He was a Zephyrin who had been trained entirely in human military academies, and his thinking patterns had been shaped by human strategic doctrine from the beginning. His skin remained neutral gray, which meant he was analyzing the situation without emotional bias. Probability analysis supports Marshal Yuki's assessment, he reported. Hegemony fleet movements indicate preparation for major offensive operations within 60 days. Coalition casualties from defensive response to hegemony attack would be approximately 40 times higher than casualties from immediate preemptive action. You calculated casualty projections, Commander Yeona asked with obvious distress. Standard operating procedure for all threat assessments, Jiho replied. Human strategic planning requires accurate cost-benefit analysis for all available options. Dr. Yunbi approached the group carrying her latest psychological assessment reports. Her work had expanded far beyond military personnel to include studies of how human military doctrine was affecting coalition civilization as a whole. Her findings made disturbing reading for anyone who remembered what the galaxy had been like before humans arrived. The psychological profiles are showing interesting developments, she announced. Coalition species are adapting to human military concepts much faster than anticipated. What we initially classified as moral injury has evolved into cultural transformation, explain, Marshal Yuki requested. Species that historically valued individual life above all other considerations now routinely make decisions that sacrifice some individuals to benefit larger populations. Cultures that once avoided conflict at any cost now actively seek strategic advantages over potential enemies. The galaxy is learning to think like humans about more than just warfare. Commander Yona looked around the memorial garden with growing unease. Are you saying that human influence is changing fundamental aspects of alien civilizations? I am saying that alien civilizations are changing themselves to incorporate human methods because those methods work, Dr. Yunbi replied. The question is whether these changes represent evolution or corruption. General Taman dismissed his cadets and joined the adult conversation. Does the distinction matter? The galaxy survived the devourer threat because alien species learned human approaches to warfare. Now they are applying those same approaches to new threats. This seems like natural adaptation. Natural for humans, perhaps, Commander Yeona said. But these changes are transforming coalition species into something their ancestors would not recognize. A priority communication signal interrupted the discussion. Marshal Yuki accepted the transmission and listened to reports from Coalition intelligence services. Her expression grew grim as she processed the new information. The hegemony has accelerated their timeline, she announced. Fleet movements indicate they plan to attack within the next week rather than waiting 60 days. Recommendations asked. General Taman, immediate implementation of preemptive strike protocols, Yuki replied. Target their forward bases and command infrastructure before they can launch coordinated attacks against coalition territories. Without Security Council approval, Commander Yeona asked. The Security Council can approve our actions after we complete them, Yuki said. Military necessity does not wait for political consensus. Strategic analyst Jiho consulted his tactical displays. Optimal strike window opens in 14 hours. Delaying beyond that point reduces probability of mission success and increases coalition casualties. Dr. Yunbi made notes on her datapad as she observed the conversation. This is exactly what I mean about cultural transformation. 6 years ago, coalition military officers would never have considered taking action without proper authorization. Now they discuss bypassing civilian authority as standard military procedure. 6 years ago, coalition military officers would have waited for the enemy to attack first and accepted massive casualties as the price of following proper procedures. Marshal Yuki replied. We taught them that saving lives is more important than following procedures. The group fell silent as they contemplated the implications. Around them, the memorial garden honored the dead from Operation Extinction, but it also marked the moment when the galaxy had learned humanity's most important lesson about survival. Sometimes the choice between right and wrong was less important than the choice between living and dying. Signaled to all coalition fleet commanders, Marshal Yuki decided. Implement preemptive strike against hegemony forward positions. Authorization to follow. And if the Security Council refuses to provide that authorization, Commander Yeona asked, then they can court-martial U.S. after we save coalition lives, General Taman said. Human military doctrine prioritizes results over procedures. As the preemptive strike began 18 hours later, the galaxy learned humanity's final lesson about warfare. The difference between aggression and defense was often a matter of timing rather than morality. Coalition forces struck hegemony bases with precision that would have been impossible before human training. Enemy fleets were destroyed before they could threaten coalition worlds. The war that might have lasted years was over in 6 days. The victory was complete, and the casualties were minimal, but Commander Yeona stood in the memorial garden afterward wondering what the galaxy had become. Coalition species now fought with human efficiency and human ruthlessness. They made human calculations about acceptable losses and strategic necessity.